We've got this second coat that we need to prep for our third and final coat. Rather than go through the entire process again, I'll tell you that we're going to pretty much do what we did in the second section of the video. We'll go ahead and use a razor blade scraper to handle any sort of excess epoxy on the edges here. We'll use either a random orbit sander with 400 grit paper or a sanding block with 400 grit paper to prep the back and get that nicely smoothed out, and then we'll move over to the guitar troji, the holder that we saw in the second section. We're going to use the, once we're there, we'll use the 400 grit paper on a block, 400 grit paper on the round sanding block here for the waist to do the prep work to smooth this epoxy up and get it ready for this final very, very thin coat that we're going to use to provide a good base for finish. Last thing we're going to do before we put that third coat on is we'll do a general Scotch-Brite or non-woven abrasive pad treatment of the body, just to make sure that we've got really good tack throughout for that third coat of epoxy. We're not going to reseal the rosette. It looks like it's in pretty good shape, nice and smooth. And the upper section of the binding here, the part of the binding that shows on the top, feels pretty good, although a little bit of light scraping is not a bad idea if you find that you've got just a little bit of epoxy wrapped around the edge. Finished the prep, and pretty good. We did a final pass with Scotch-Brite just to make sure that we've got a well-toothed surface here. I've already mixed up a batch of epoxy. What we're trying to do with this final coat is to get the thinnest possible layer of epoxy, just thick enough so that it provides uniform color. So just like the earlier coats, we're going to do a nice thin application. What's different about this coat versus others is we're going to use quite a bit of pressure to take this epoxy off. We're really concerned with just wetting the surface, and that's it. So we normally will not see any unfilled pores at this stage of filling. They're already done. We probably did not sand through into any pores when we prep for this final coat. Pretty much tell when you start opening pores. You get down into raw wood. we're going to do the application, which is really not so much about finding unfilled pores, but simply getting enough epoxy on the guitar so that we can work it off again. And at this point I'm going to say that we've wetted out the entire surface and we're really ready to take epoxy off. You can see there's really no reason to work the surface like we did on our first and second coat. We're simply going to use a lot of pressure and get a uniformly wetted out surface. We're actually going for what would be an extraordinarily dry surface on, say, a first or second coat. You can actually go a little bit more vertical on the squeegee to ensure that we're not dragging too much. If we do end up with any streaks, we can go back in, do a quick cleanup. Great. Notice that there's a uniform sheen here, but it's not really that high gloss when you get right down to it. Pretty satin looking. I'll do the same thing on the sides that I did on the back here, and that should set us up for success. See that light gloss on the back. We'll just check to make sure we didn't get any epoxy wrapped around the edge. Otherwise, I'm going to do a light prep with a coarse Scotch-Brite. You can get these at automotive stores. You can get them at Home Depot and Lowe's. And you just literally want to pull the gloss off, get things knocked down to where the surface is pretty well toothed. It may take a little bit, and you'll see that you'll pick up some residue here from the epoxy. But other option is you can very carefully use corner grit paper. I'd recommend you don't use a large block. You're not trying to level anymore, you're already level. You're really trying just to tooth the surface and not introduce any discontinuities, and finally knock off some dust nibs. I found another little area where a little bit of epoxy here that, there it is, knocked it right off. So this will give you a real good idea of what sort of shape your surface is in. I'm going to avoid over sanding and cutting through, which may give me a little bit of a difference in surface color. Keep in mind this final coat is really to give us uniform color more than anything else. That looks pretty good. So I'm just going to go ahead and go over the entire instrument. Make sure that I've done a pretty good job of getting any dust nibs off, and again doing an effective job in toothing the surface, which is really what we're after. And using this #1 Scotch-Brite pad, you could probably use a 0 Scotch-Brite pad, it'd be just about as effective. Is really all that's required. And make sure you don't cut through on the edges, and I think that's about it. I'll do a light sanding on the top prior to shooting the vinyl sealer. I'll do a very thorough cleanup with compressed air and a naphtha wipe down, And then I'm going to take a real close look at the guitar, tack it, and then shoot the first coat of vinyl sealer. So that pretty much covers epoxy pore sealing on guitar bodies.